Ever wondered why some clients say yes to some gardeners and no to others? You spend time in the garden walking around with the potential client, working out a quote. They're nodding, they're agreeing with what you're proposing. And when it comes to the crunch of saying, about the quote, you get that, well, think about it, or I've got to consult my partner, or I've got other quotes. You walk away, you know they're not going to get back to you. You know you've lost them. Listen, over the last 4 decades of running McPhee's Gardening, I've got a little tricks that I'm going to share with you about making that client go from, well, think about it, to when can you start? G'day viewers, Jeff McPhee's Gardening, Melbourne, Australia. Let's be honest, when we start our business, we go out with a mindset of being a good gardener or a lawn care operator. We enjoy our job with technicians. We're reasonably knowledgeable, or we will get that knowledge, and we get great delight in transforming our client's garden or their lawn and seeing the thrill on their face. But of course, we're not salesmen. The word just cringes up your spine. You know the ones when you go and buy a car and they come from everywhere, buy our car, buy our car. The car salesman or real estate agent, we regard them as the bottom of the barrel. So therefore, the word salesman to us is very difficult to comprehend. Further to compound this problem that we may have is we're leaving thousands on the table. We're starting to think, are we worth it? Are we worthy of doing this job? And what's worse, we see other contractors and we know we're better than them. We know we do better work, but they're closing the deal every time and we're missing out. We're doing something wrong. So today's video, it's not about being a salesman. It's not about having fancy sales pitches. It's about changing the mindset when we're talking to our client to close the deal. I've learnt some of these things over the 4 decades. Now, they work for most customers. Of course, there's going to be customers. It doesn't matter how good you are at sales pitching. It doesn't matter how good you are at convincing the client to close the deal. They just won't come along the party. There are people out there that are not worth having clients. And we've talked about this in previous videos about identifying those clients. Keep away from them. But the ones we're talking about are the ones that are going to be of value to our business, are going to, value our worth. So here's the truth. Most businesses aren't salespeople. They are guides. They're going to guide their client through the process. And this is what we're going to get to shortly. First things first, it's not what you say, it's how you think. Think about you as being the doctor. You're not just giving a quote. You're not just taking an order. A doctor doesn't sell prescriptions. He finds a problem and he presents the solution. You as the gardener or the lawn care expert will do the same. You look at the problem and you provide a solution. So you're not just giving a quote. You're not just at a Chinese restaurant taking orders. And by changing that mindset, it's going to help you close the deal. Of course, our problem is when we start talking money, we freeze up. We say the wrong thing, or worse, we don't say much at all. And this is where, at this point, it's critical that we understand the client's psychology. It's so important that we understand how to convince that client to say, yes, when can you start? So you're not there to be the cheapest quote or beg for work. You're there to guide the client. You're there to understand their pains. That garden, that overrun garden that you're going to fix. The lawn that desperately needs mowing, etc. Treat yourself as a guide, and it's going to really help to close a deal at the end. Stay with me. So in quoting, we know there's lots of little tricks, and we've talked about them in previous videos. Importantly, of course, getting back to the customer is so important quickly. Professional, prompt and reliable, all those golden words. Present yourself clean. Now, many of us get to that stage and we think, that's it, we're going to win this, not a problem. But there's a lot more to it. The days where you stumble out of the ute and you front up to the client and you say, oh, what have you got in mind? Well, straight away, you're starting to talk technical. You're starting to talk about fertilising and all these technical gardening terms. What the client's doing is starting to think about what's to be done and price and you're not sharing their vision or their pains. What the secret is, you need to talk their language. Don't talk gardener language, talk their language. So what I do when I first arrive, I say, thanks for calling us out. Now, what we're going to do today is I want you to tell me everything and tell me your vision. I'll ask lots of questions so that we're on the same page. I'll take some measurements and I'll take some photos. So at the end, we'll be clear on what's going to be done. So what you've portrayed to the client is your professionalism. You've eased the client and explain the process. You put the client at ease. But the most important thing from here is to talk their talk. Don't get involved in the technical aspects. That will come when you provide your quote, when you detail your quote step by step about fertilising, about aeration, about pruning and mulching. You'll do all those things in the presentation of your quote. So we're starting the quote with a client. We're going to ask them, what is your vision? What do you see your dream is for your garden? Now you must listen very carefully what they have to say. We're going to take the technical aspect and we're going to put their mindset into about what is going to be achieved. Example, I ask the client their vision. They say, I want an area where I can sit down and have a cup of tea and watch grandchildren play. What you'll do then is reinforce, listen, what I can see we can do with this area is open up that part of the area so that your grandchildren can play, and we'll provide a nice garden settee area here where you can have a cup of tea and watch your grandchildren. So what you've done, you've understood their pain points, you've understood what they want, rather than say, oh, let's just prune this and mow the grass there and weed that and mulch there. That doesn't mean much to a lot of people. You know, the couple that are working, business people, and they want their lawn done. They don't want to hear about the process of aeration and coring and fertilising. They want to know that they'll have the best lawn in the street, or they'll have a lawn to be proud of. You know, when we come home at night, we can sit out and have a glass of wine and look over our garden. That's what they want to know. You need to reinforce that. You know, the old bloke that, you say to him, listen, Jack, you've worked so hard all these years. Let me do the lawns for you. You can pot around in the garden, but you don't have to worry about the heavy aspect of the mowing. And it's surprisingly changing that mindset to making the customer feel good, making the customer see the end result. You know, I'm going to have a better lawn than the bloke next door because Jeff's explained that he's going to make it look so good. You know, inviting friends over for a barbecue, emphasise that. You explain to the client, listen, we're going to do a garden rejuvenation. If we clear this area around the barbecue area and perhaps a little bit of paving or add bits and pieces so that you can have a nice barbecue with your friends, and they'll envisage the end result, rather than you just say, prune this, do that, the technical jargon. As I said before, that technical jargon will come in the actual quote process itself in the form that you write up. Now here's a good one. They call it the trust trigger. Proof beats promise every time. So when you go to the client and you want to show them before and after shots of your work, proof of the work that you do means so much more than a promise. Now, taking an example, you might be doing a garden very similar to the one that you've just recently completed, and you show the client, oh, look, I did a job very similar to this one. Here's some photos. Carry them on your phone, or you might have printed photos. You might have a video on your phone to show them the work that you did. That is proof. It's not a promise. Closing the deal is the hardest bit about the quoting process. Remember when I said, I'll get back to you. Now, a lot of people say that, or look, I'll leave it with you. Don't do that anymore. You've guided the client through the process of understanding their pain. You've looked at their problem and you've provided a solution. You understand their vision. So continue with that with closing the deal. What I do is, rather than say, oh, I'll get back to you, take it or leave it sort of concept. And look, with lawn mowing, you probably, and I've done that a lot too, look, here's the price, and you walk away. But some of these big ticket items, the ones that are really worth chasing, it can really mean a tremendous boost to your profits of your business. It's worth putting time. You put a lot of time and effort in doing the quote. Why not put the same time and enthusiasm in closing the deal? So rather than just sort of, put it back in their hands, take control. Mrs. Jones, we talked about providing that lovely area for your grandchildren to run around and you're sitting at the table having a cup of tea. I can actually book that in next Monday. It'll only take me a day to do. I can prepare all the materials the day before and I'll have it completed Monday afternoon, or I can do it the following Tuesday. So you're giving it two positive yeses. So she's going to pick one or the other. And a lot of people do that. They sort of say yes, even before you've talked about the price. And then, of course, then you've got to introduce the price, because you'll say, oh, and by the way, totaling all that up, it'll come to whatever the amount is. Or you may say, listen, Mrs. Jones, I need to work out some materials. What I'll do is I'll provide you an email tonight, and I'll ring you 9 o'clock in the morning, and we can discuss what day we want this booked in. So you're not being pushy, but you're assuming that you're going to get the job. Having that mindset of assumption that you will get it can really make a big difference. Might not work all the time, but it's something to push forward with. If they continue to say, listen, I need to talk to my husband, I need to think about it, say, look, I quite understand. How about I ring you tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock and we can discuss it from there, whether we want to, when you still want to book it in, I still can keep that next Monday available to you. Worth trying. Look, have a crack at it on your next quote. Just try it, see how you go. It might just change that mindset, but just be on the, you're the guide, remember, this time. You're not sort of just talking technical jargon. Talk on their language. Take control. Guide them through. And at the end, when you're closing, assume that you've got it and work from there. Look, it's one of my crazy ways of doing things. It's worked for me over 4 decades, especially in the last few decades. It's really been a godsend to me. I've advised other people to go that way, and they agree. Some customers, it wouldn't matter what you did, as I said at the start of the video, whatever you did, that sort of customer. And of course, that's a customer you don't want. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you're new to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one. And your thoughts on guiding the customer. Do you think that's a way to go? See you on the next one. Bye.